All right, hey everybody. So today we're going to look at some basic GeoGebra tools, and we're going to use the browser-based version because it's the most accessible. So if you want to be able to save any of the work we're going to do today, you're going to want to go to geogebra.org, and then you're going to click on the little icon in the upper right, and that's going to prompt you to either sign in or create an account. Once you do that, if you click on that icon, it's going to take you to your library of saved constructions. Then you're going to want to navigate to geogebra.org/classic. And that's going to take you to this view. And you can work here even if you don't create an account. You just won't be able to save your work. So this is the classic GeoGebra view with the tools along the top. And anytime you want to get to your settings, you click on one of these little menus, and then the gear, and that's going to take you to your settings. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So what we want to do is play with just the basic tools along the top. If you click or hover on these, you'll see that there's a lot of tools underneath each of these basic tools, and we'll get into those in the next video. So by default, you always want to go back to this arrow tool when you're clicking in the view, otherwise you start creating objects. So by default, the grid and the axes are visible. We're going to construct things that aren't dependent on the grid or the axes, so we want to hide those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in here, and I'm going to click show axes, and then I'm going to right click again, and then left click show grid. Now there may be times that you actually do want to use the grid. So there's the basic square grid, there's also an isometric grid, and a radial grid, and those can be useful depending on what sort of project you're working on. But for us, we don't want the grid. Let me default it back to the square grid. Okay, so your first tool is the point tool, and this is exactly what it sounds like. If you click in the graphics view, it's going to create a point. And you're going to see in the algebra view, it shows you the X and Y coordinates of the point. If I go back to my arrow tool, I can grab that point and move it around, and you can see that the coordinates change. And I can click as many times as I want and create as many points as I want. If I want to move multiple points around, I can right click and drag over to select multiple points, and then left click on one of them, and then I can move multiple points at the same time. If I don't want a point to move, say I don't want this point A to move, what I can do is go to settings with that point selected and click fix object. And now if I try to move that point, it doesn't go anywhere, but I can still move my other 3 points. So that's useful if you're trying to keep from accidentally moving a point that you want fixed. Next, we're going to do the line tool. And if I just click out in my white space, it's going to create 2 points to define that line. Otherwise, I can also click on any 2 points in the view to define a line through those 2 points. You'll notice that as I create these points and these lines, they are labeled. I don't really like my objects that aren't points to be labeled. So what I can do, going back to that arrow tool, is I can right click on a line and uncheck the box that says show label. But if I don't want any future lines to also be labeled, I can go over here to my general settings and go to labeling and click new points only. And that's only going to label my new points, but not my new lines. So now if I create a line, it doesn't have a label. So that's cool. So let's hide this label for line G. And now only our points have labels. Another thing I like to do in my settings is So these are our global settings. These are our graphics settings, and these are our algebra settings. I like to show auxiliary objects, which we'll see how that's going to play out in a little bit. And I like to sort by object type. So what that does is it groups all my lines and all my points together in my algebra view, so that if I want to, I can select all of them at the same time by clicking on the word point or on the word line. I also just want to show the definition of my objects. I don't care about the equation of the line. I just care about the fact that the line is defined by points E and F. Notice also that as I move the points, the lines defined by those points stay on those 2 points because the line is defined by the point. All right, next let's move over to our perpendicular line tool. So this tool creates a line that goes through a given point that is perpendicular to a given line. And I can either select the point first or the line first. So let's say I want a line perpendicular to line AB that goes through point A. So I can click A and then the line, or let's say I want a perpendicular through point B, I can click the line first and then the point. If I click out in the white space, it's going to create a point, and then I can just select the line I want perpendicular to. But we're never going to just click out in the empty space. We'll always select a point that's already there. Next, we're going to move to our polygon tool. So this is our freeform polygon tool. If I just click out in the white space, it's going to create points for me. But we're probably never going to do that. We always want to use points that are there. So you just click on a point and then go around and end on the point that you started from. And I don't necessarily need to have a convex polygon. You can create a polygon that's any kind of shape you want, as long as you end on the point that you started from. And you can even do weird things where the lines cross each other, but as a general rule, I would advise against that. Next, we go with our circle with center through point tool. And the way this works is you first select a point that's the center of the circle, and then you select a point that's on the circle. So let's say I want circle AG. Then if I move point G, that changes the size of my circle. If I move point A, well, I can't move point A because we fixed it. But if I were to move point A, it could change the size and the location of the circle. So let's do that again. This time I'm just going to click out in the empty space, and that's going to create those 2 points. So you can see that changes the size and location of the circle, and that changes the size of the circle. We're rarely going to use any of these conic section tools, but if you wanted to create an ellipse that passes through, or that has these 2 points as foci and then passes through this point, that's how you would do that. The angle tool can be useful. It tells you what size a given angle is, and it's always going to work counterclockwise. So let's say I want to know what the measure of this angle is. I'm going to click B, then F, then E, and I totally got that backwards. I want to click E, then F, then B, and that's going to give me the one that goes inside there. I always get that mixed up. So EFB gives you the measure of this angle as 47.28 degrees. And that can be useful if you're trying to copy an angle, because I now have this angle named, and I could construct something that has the same measure as angle beta if I want. The Reflect About Line tool, we're going to use a lot in our constructions. So that just creates the mirror image of an object across a line. So I can reflect a point over a line, or I can reflect a whole polygon over a line. I can reflect this crazy polygon over this line if I want to. Or a point. So that's how that works. The slider we'll get into a little bit later, but basically what this does is it creates a variable, either a real number or a number that represents an angle or an integer. And then you can create objects that are dependent on a variable. And that's what allows us to create things like animations and stuff like that in GeoGebra, which are really cool. And then this is just the Move Graphics view. So it's that hand tool that allows you to reposition your graphics view. It's the same thing as the Move tool when you select on the background. So that's your basic tools. If you want to zoom in or out, you can use your scroll wheel. So that's going to be useful. And then we'll get into some of these other tools that are in the drop down in the next series of videos. All right, thanks so much.